Well, hey there, everyone. Welcome back. Welcome back to the Kingdom Business Podcast. I'm your host, Erica Pyle. And today, my friends, we are running a little late. I was having some tech issues again. My goodness, I'm going to have to get that worked out. So, friends, today we're talking about how to know that you're building the right thing in your kingdom business. And specifically, I want to talk to you a little bit today about why clarity, confirmation, and momentum don't actually come from more planning or figuring or thinking about it, but rather clarity, confirmation, and momentum, confidence, it's going to actually come from action. Okay, so that's what we're going to be talking about today. And I feel like we're going to be talking a little bit more in the space of mindset today. And so I want you to just kind of get into that headspace, okay? I know that a lot of times I'm telling you, get your notebook. We're going to do something very specific, whether we're talking about offers or audience, customers, sales systems, tech stack, all that kind of stuff. We get really particular and practical. But sometimes we need to really just talk about mindset. We need to talk about how are we approaching these things? Because if you are not coming at this with a biblical entrepreneurial mindset, if you're not actually coming at this from a mindset that understands how things like momentum and real results are created in your business, then you'll just feel like you're chasing your tail a lot. And I don't want that for you, especially since I know that the main person who comes and finds my podcast and listens to my episodes is someone who is likely gotten started, has seen some success, has seen, some sales, has seen some traction, but it stops and starts and stops and starts. And there's not a sense of like, I figured it out. I have a system. It's automated. It's continuing to produce. And when we're in that kind of a space where we're just kind of finding traction for the first time or just getting started, we can start to get frustrated and even a little bit like distracted by movement, but it not actually being momentum. It's not actually the thing that's going to produce consistency in our results. And so we got to take a step back and we've got to think about the mindset. We've got to think about the approach. And so, one thing that I've found, I just did a workshop at the end of last year. And one of the main things that I heard from participants is when I asked them, like, what are you struggling with the most? Besides the market and what, we were talking about late last year and into the new year about how the market is shifted and how buyer habits have changed. That is something that people are finding a little bit frustrating, a little bit difficult. But beyond that, I think that something that is a commonality in my community right now is people saying, I've done the work, I've put in the work, and I've created an offer. I have put an offer out there. I've started conversations. I am putting out content. I'm gathering a community of people who are interested, but I'm not sure if this is the right thing. Like even this morning, I had a coaching call with someone who is like, you know what? In the last week, I'm really feeling like the Lord is pivoting me into a new direction. And so this can happen when we are looking at what we're doing and we're like, okay, this isn't the results that I was expecting. This is what isn't, it can happen at that time. And when that happens and we think to ourselves, okay, well, I'm going to pivot, it really does come from the place that says, am I building the right thing? And especially for a kingdom builder, someone who is building according to a vision or a call or an assignment that God has given them, I think that this is a valid question, is to say, does what I'm building, is this thing that's out here in front of me, does it look like the thing that God has spoken to me about? Is this it? Is this it? And and it's quite common in the Bible that God says something and then we get to work on it or we get to moving and then we're immediately like, is this it? Is this it? I think about Abraham and Sarah. And God gives Abraham the promise of offspring of a child, even though Sarah's barren. And this takes decades to come to pass, decades. And I think it's very, I mean, like you can see it in Abraham's story. He's like, okay, well, God said this, it's not happening. So let's move some things around. And I bet you that a lot of times he was probably thinking, am I doing this right? I mean, when he's like basically cheating on his wife with Hagar to produce Ishmael, he had to have been thinking, is this right? And he must have been thinking, like, well, but Sarah said to do it. It's okay. Like, it's going to be all right. And then poor guy, God comes and is like, yeah, no, that's not it. Right. So I think that in faith based walking things out, we tend to have this question come upon us a lot. You know, am I doing this right? And I think that that question comes up a lot because of timing. You know, I think I mentioned this on last week's episode, but there's a pastor that my husband and I are connected to. Um, and his name is Pastor Whitman. And he famously said this years ago, and it stuck with me. He said, um, stick with the word that God spoke to you and not so much to the picture that you've painted of it. And I feel like that's so important, especially for us kingdom entrepreneurs. When you're building something, you know, I get it. We're visionaries and we see things that God is showing us. And so it can be quite easy to hear what God has said and then paint this picture of what we think it's supposed to look like. And then before you know it, we're trying to build according to our own pattern. And we've almost like forgotten what the pattern that God has given us looks like ultimately. And sometimes that's because he hasn't given us a full picture. Sometimes that's because he hasn't given us the full vision, right? And we've talked about that in the past. It's because if he gave us the full vision, many of us would be like, yeah, peace out. I'm not doing that. We're like, no, that is too much. I don't have enough in me. That's not me. I'm not the girl for the job. That would kill me. I don't think I could do that. I'm not made for that. We'd give all kinds of excuses. And so a lot of times God doesn't give us the full picture. And so when that happens, as human beings, we're like, but I still need to know what to do. And so instead of just building that first step, we try to figure out the whole thing. And then we build this beautiful vision board of what we think it should look like. And now we're building according to it. And it's like, hold on, I am like now ahead of God. I lost him somewhere. He's not with me. And it's like, how do you know that? How would you know that God isn't with you? Well, Colossians tells us, let the peace of Christ rule in your heart. And so if you're in a situation where you're building and you are constantly having no peace, that's a really good indicator that you made a wrong turn somewhere where you lost God. And it's like, slow down, pray, and go back. And that's why, you know, the conversation that I referred to that I was having this morning, the coaching call, I really enjoyed it because that's what the conversation was about. It was about someone who was saying, you know what? I was running along and I realized that I didn't have that peace. And so I sat with the Lord and he realigned me. He brought me back to where I needed to be. And I realized that some things that I was chasing, some things that I was trying to accomplish, they weren't in alignment with what he was showing me and what gave me peace. And so now I have to backtrack a little bit. I have to make different decisions and I have to go in this direction. And I was like, yes, that's really good. All right. So now what do you need? What kinds of support do you need to go on that journey? And in this instance, she had to unwind some decisions that she had made. She had to unwind some commitments that she had made so that she could honor what God was showing her to do next. And I thought, this is a really powerful discussion. And so I think that we need to really be able to take time when we're building this thing with God to not be afraid of that question. Am I building the right thing? Because if we start to value the if we start to value like the amount of time that we've invested into something sheerly, like simply for the time or our effort. Like I had conversations like that in the last week where I've had people talking to me in coaching scenarios where they're like, okay, but I've spent so many hours on this. If I go in this different direction, I'm going to waste all these hours. And I'm like, no, 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 no. Don't look at it like that. God wastes nothing. And so if you have gone down a side road, God is going to redeem that. That is just who he is. So there are upgrades, there are lessons, there are journeys in that are valid and that actually will build you up if you will let them. So the question really is, what upgrades are here for me? What do you want me to learn from this? What can I glean from this, right? But then still be obedient to where God is wanting you to go. So you've got to make sure that you're not afraid to ask the question, am I building the right thing? But once we're willing to ask that question and say, okay, am I building the right thing? Now it comes time for us to sit down and really be willing to ask ourselves the question, like, am I if I am building the right thing, if I know that this is the thing that God has called me to build, now, am I willing to start moving? Because I think sometimes when we ask, am I building the right thing? We're using that as a justification to not move. I think that we need to stop getting stuck in the question of, am I building the right thing? Is this the right thing? And we need to actually step into action. We need to step into motion. So, the best way to explain this is really my story, because I've been back in entrepreneurship for 10 years now. When I started in my entrepreneurship journey this time around, I was in the health space. So I'm a holistic health coach. I'm a certified holistic health coach. And I was working with an MLM, and I was selling health products in conjunction with my health coaching services. And so I had created a number of courses and programs that people would join. And then in the course of the program, I would offer them the products as support to what we were doing in the program, you know? And I had some traction. I did. But what would happen was whenever I would get to a key moment in my business building journey, and it was really the moment when I was getting ready to formalize a membership, like I was getting ready to formalize, like I was, best way to explain it is like I was getting ready to cross the Rubicon. I was getting ready to cross over a place that I could not come back from. These bigger kind of system wide decisions that are made where it's like when you put this system into place, the amount of effort and time and resource that it's going to take to unwind it becomes problematic. And so you're kind of like stuck in that idea. And I had multiple times, like I had gone around this mountain multiple times where I had gotten to the point where I was getting ready to make this massive investment, this massive like commitment and say, I'm all in on this. And it happened like 4 different times in this business model. And every time, like at one point, I took people's money and 3 days later had to turn around and give back thousands of dollars because I was like, this is not it. Because at that moment, I asked God, is this right? And I did not have peace. Now, I should have been asking that question ahead of time. But here's the thing, I was one of those people who was so nervous that I had invested so much time and energy, and I couldn't see any other way that this could work. I was like, I just spent an entire year, over 700 hours of coursework. I took all these tests. I spent all this money to become the certified holistic health coach. I went all in on this program with this company. I became a brand ambassador. I am building a team. I am all in. So, like, it can't work any other way. And yet, for whatever reason, when I would ask the question at the most inopportune time, God, am I building this the right way? He would be like, no. And I was like, how did we get here? How did we get here? And it was because I was being insistent on this has got to work like this. And I did this 3 or 4 times, no joke. And what it took for me was to find myself in a setting with a coach where someone was willing to confront me and where I actually had put myself in a position where someone could confront me. Now, I know that that sounds like, I mean, confront, it sounds confrontational. But the reality is this: entrepreneurship can be very lonely in that we think we have to do it all on our own. We think that to be a successful entrepreneur, we have to have the idea on our own. We have to create and build everything on our own. We have to implement everything on our own. We have to figure it out on our own. We have to succeed on our own because we're entrepreneurs. We're self-made, right? But you're also a follower of Jesus. You're also a disciple of Jesus. If you're listening to this podcast, I'm pretty sure that you are, because it is a faith based podcast where we talk a lot about following Jesus in this process and bringing the kingdom. So if you are a disciple of Jesus, then you know, like, even when he was sending them out to preach the gospel, he sent them out two by two. Like, why is he doing that? Well, it tells us in Ecclesiastes that we're better together, and that if one of us stumbles and falls, then there's someone else there to help us up. And in entrepreneurship, it's no different. We really should have, a community of people, and maybe even a mentor or a guide who can help us and can confront us with those things, those familiar thoughts, those temptations, those things that will cause us to shrink back or to go into old familiar habits that don't serve us. And so it was years in, and finally I made a decision. This was probably like 3 or 4 years ago. I made a decision and I said, "You know what? This isn't working, me doing it on my own. I'm missing something. If I'm making the same mistake over and over again, and I keep on coming up with this is not the right way to build this is becoming expensive. It's becoming costly because every time I go around this mountain and I relaunch and I try something again differently, I'm investing more time, I'm investing more effort and more energy, and I'm not getting the results that I want." And so I finally, about 4 years ago, I was like, you know what? I'm going to invest in a coach. And I was at that stage where most of us are when we realize that we need a coach or that we would like to have a coach, but we're like, maybe this is not responsible. Like, maybe this is too soon. And it's so funny now because I have people that come into my mentorship, and that's where we start the conversation sometimes, is people being like, I want to hear about this, but I want to hear about it from the perspective of when I'm going to be ready for it because I know I'm not ready for it now. And I'm like, what's making you think that you're not ready for it now? And inevitably, I find that they're in that same exact spot that I was in when I finally decided I need to be confronted because there are some things that I have blind spots around that I can't see. And so when I'm asking myself, is this the right thing to be building? Is this the right way to be building it? Something in me is telling me no. But A, I want confirmation of that. And B, even if I know that it's not the right thing to build, I have no visibility into what the right thing to build is. I'm having a hard time. So if those are the two things that you're finding yourself bumping up against, if you're like, I know I don't have that peace in my heart. Like, I know that I'm not building something right here. Something's not right here. But if you also are aware that you have on some kind of blinders where you can't understand exactly why it's not right or what to fix, and you need help, then sister, you are in the moment where you actually need a coach. And these days, like, when I needed a coach, there were not very affordable options. I'm just going to be honest. Like, back when I was needing a coach, what I was looking at was at least $1,000 a month. And in the moment when I was looking for the coaching, I actually went to people who were charging this. They were charging over $1,000 a month. It was in the realm of 1,200 to 1,500 a month. And I listened to the pitch and I was like, you know what? I can't afford that with where I'm at in my business right now. I cannot afford 12 to $1,500. And what wound up happening was, as a result of having the conversation with the person to say, hey, I need coaching, but not I can't afford that, but this is what I need. like a couple days later, that person came into my DMs and they were like, "Hey, we heard you. We're looking at building out this different group coaching scenario and we're wondering, would this serve you?" And at that moment in time, that coaching program was life for me. And as a result, I was able to step into that coaching program. And even though I knew, because I didn't have that peace in my heart, I knew that I wasn't building the right thing in the moment. What that coaching community helped me to do was to be able to see why it wasn't the right thing, what was the right thing to build, and help me figure out how to build it properly, how to build it right. And so I will always be a fan and an evangelist for coaching, not just because I'm a coach. I mean, I've been a coach the whole time I've been in my entrepreneurial journey, but I was a health coach for a while. And then it wasn't until 4 years ago that I shifted over to letting go of being health coach and becoming a business coach full time. And it was the best decision that I ever made because it was the right thing to be building. I For me, it was hard because I was like, well, then I've wasted all that time as a health coach. Well, actually, it's not a waste of time because now, even in my business coaching, I coach on health. I have an entire course inside of my mentorship on biblical health. And it's very it's vital to the people that I coach because my ideal customer, my ideal mentee, she struggles with her health. She struggles with anxiety and overwhelm and burnout and autoimmune, even. And so, my training in those spaces and being able to speak to those issues in the midst of business coaching is vital. It's like so perfect. And God designed it that way. But I would have never been able to see it myself because all I could see was I spent all of this time in health coaching and preparing for this and getting set up for this. And like I'm just like I can't see it. But once I stepped into the coaching environment and I had people outside of me that could ask me questions and could confront some of the things that I was believing and some of the things that I was thinking and holding on to, it was such a help because in one session, I was able to break free from some of that and go, oh, you know what? This is the lane I want to be in. And then we started thinking about and talking about, okay, then what's the right way to build this? And from there, I took off. Like it took less than a year for me to actually launch and build the thing that I was meant to build. And so this is why I think it becomes so important not only to be willing to ask the question, am I building the right thing? But also to be willing to suss out the answer quickly so that you can get moving. Why? Why? Because clarity, momentum, confidence, these things are not built in the planning phase. These things do not come to you in the planning, thinking, figuring phase. They don't. They come in the doing phase. Momentum only comes when you consistently act over a period of time. That's what momentum is. Like it's actually a scientific equation, mathematical equation. And so momentum is a function of movement. If you don't have movement, you cannot have momentum. Does this make sense? So just practically speaking, like the definition of momentum has wrapped up in it movement. So if you're not moving, you cannot have momentum. And momentum is built when you're moving consistently in the same direction. That's how momentum picks up and that's how it continues. And it's about not running into friction. And so when you know you're building the right thing and you're acting on that decision, that's when momentum is built. Now, you might have a bigger argument to say, well, Erica, what about clarity? You're telling me that clarity is can't be built in planning or in figuring or in learning. Yep, I am telling you that. Think about it. If you were in high school and did any sciences, if you went to college and did any sciences, it's very likely that not only did you have a lecture, but you also had a lab. I know for me in college, that was the case. We had like a 3 credit that was the lecture and a 1 credit that was the lab. You had to take them together. You could not just take the lecture and not the lab. You couldn't take the lab and not the lecture. You needed to take them both. And the reason is because this is how we learn. We learn, the lecture gives us the notes. We take the notes, we write them down. It goes in our ear holes. We're processing, we're writing it down. It's helping us to process even more. But the ultimate in processing is doing. So we learn about the chemical, the chemical reaction between two components. And we learn all about why it happens and the electrons and the neutrons and like all the things that are interacting and the bonds that are being created and how the color is going to change or the smell is going to change or the state is going to change based on it. And we learn all of that. Okay. But until we actually see it happen, when we put those two things together in the beaker and we watch it happen, there is a whole other level of clarity that comes when you see it actually happen. So this has to do with manipulative, so us getting like kinetic learning, getting our hands involved, but also experiential learning. And then there's another way that we learn even beyond that, which is to reteach that which we learned. And so there's all of these components that come together to bring clarity. And it's so much more than just, okay, I read about it, I took a course about it, I've written a plan for it, I understand it, I'm thinking about implementing it. No, no, no. Now you've got to move into action because action breeds clarity. Action breeds momentum, but action also breeds clarity. Now, the last one is confirmation or confidence, okay? This is the one that I think is the trickiest because I think sometimes we think, well, Erica, if I was confident, then I would just be doing it. So I need confirmation so that I can get moving so I can build confidence. And I'm like, no, 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 it doesn't work like that. You need to actually build enough confidence that you will try. That's important. Write that down. You need to build enough confidence so that you will try. Trying isn't going to build the confidence. Confidence to try is what's going to build more confidence. Because as you do, you become confident. And as you do, you gather confirmation. This is how it works. So in my example where I was telling you that I shifted from being a health coach to being a business coach, and I did it almost immediately. Like it was over the period of 4 months. I made the decision, I pivoted and I changed everything and I went out to market with my new idea and I shifted everything within 4 months, okay? And I learned this firsthand that when I finally made the decision and said, this is what I'm doing, and then I started to move, clarity came, momentum came, and confidence came as I began to move. And I found that with the confidence piece, I just needed enough confidence to try. So, what did that look like? What could that look like? It could look like going into a small group situation, a little workshop, or, like a one off coaching situation, and just being like, okay, this is what I'm thinking to do. This is what I'm thinking to build. This is why I'm convicted of this. I believe that God gave this to me. I do have peace in my heart that it's the right thing to build. And this is what I'm going to do. And then to have somebody, either a peer, an accountability partner, or even a coach, to be able to say, okay, like, let's talk it through. Okay. It's in that conversation that you can build your own confirmation. Like, it's one thing to get confirmation from God because you've got peace in your heart and you have a knowing, a discernment that you know it's the right thing. But when we get ready to move into action, when we start to take steps, that's where the pragmatic mind comes into play. And we're like, okay, but am I doing it right? And no, God is not going to unfurl a scroll from heaven and give you all the steps that you need to do it practically, step by step like that. He may give you the first step and then you do it, and then the next step and then you do it. And that's fine. You can walk by faith. But if you are wanting to create a plan and then act according to that plan, like I did when I shifted over into my business coaching space, the way that I built the confidence to try is that I went into that coaching call and I just said, this is what I'm planning on doing. You've gone before me. You've done these sorts of things before. You've had success in this space. Look at my plan. Do you see any problems with it? Do you have any places where you can confront it with questions and I can be kind of prompted to look at it and consider whether I feel confident in it. And in that process, just the conversation, just the challenging of it, just the coaching experience, I was able to be like, yes, I do believe that this is going to work. And I had confidence to step out and try. Now, here's the thing. After those 4 months, do you think that I just got out there and I did everything and it just worked? It didn't work like that. I tried things and they failed, and I realized, like, it was in that season that I heard the Lord say, your next big win, your big win is through your next small win. So just focus on the next small win. And so I would ask God, what is my next small win? He would give it to me. And then I would utilize a coaching container of some sort, whether it was a workshop. I did a short term coaching situation over a summer during that first year that was really helpful and relevant to me. And I would use those spaces to plan how to get to the next small win. So that because I knew God said that my big win was through the next small win. And so he just started stringing small wins together. And within 1 year, I was off to the races, and I was successful. I was hitting my targets. And this was all because I was willing to ask the question at the beginning of the year, am I building the right thing? And when my heart that lacked peace, lacked the peace of Christ, told me, no, you're not. He showed me how to walk through coaching environments and, these supported environments so that I could know that I was building the right thing and then get moving to build that thing so that I could have clarity and momentum and confidence to keep on going. And that's what happened. And so, you know, I just a couple thoughts as I close up here. First and foremost, peace is never going to come from simply staying still. I know that we think sometimes, well, peace is when I am still. No, no, no. Peace is when your heart is at peace. Peace is when you have the experience of the Christ's peace in your heart. And you can actually feel that if you're in the middle of a war. So it's getting good at knowing what peace feels like, and to know, like, where 100% of the time are you going to feel the peace of Christ? It's when you're aligned. It's when you are found in Christ. He says, abide in me and you will bear much fruit. Stay connected with me. That's John 15. So we have to make sure that we're constantly finding ourselves in Christ, positioning ourselves in Christ from that place of rest. That's Hebrews 4. And we're asking the question right there, what next? What now? Am I aligned properly? Because that's the place of peace. It's not going to be when all your ducks are in a row. It's not going to be when everything is popping off and doing great necessarily. Like, you could have peace in those moments. But I've had experiences where I've gotten a result in the wrong way and I do not have any peace. That's the example of the thousands of dollars that I made on that membership. And then 3 days later, I had to turn around and give it back. So it's not, peace doesn't come just because you see results. Peace doesn't come just because you are, like, you think you're in a peaceful Zen environment. That's not what it is. Peace comes from where you are found, where you are aligned. And if you are abiding in Christ, if you're staying connected to the vine, if you are resting in him, that's where you'll find peace. I think that sometimes the reason that we get stuck before the place where we confirm whether we're building the right thing is because we're so committed to finishing whatever it is that we started. And I got to tell you something, this is one of the saddest statements that I ever say in a coaching space, but the wrong effort is never going to be worth it. The wrong effort is never going to be worth it. You can never redeem wrong effort. Like, we're not going to get credit for wrong effort. This is so hard, right? It's like God can redeem the time. He can redeem our effort. He can redeem. But on that side, we have to let him redeem it. We are still in that moment going to feel the loss of all of the energy and effort that we put in to something that didn't fruit, right? Now, again, he can redeem it. So, but the key is, will you come off of that lane and move into the lane that you're supposed to be in? So many times, the women that I work with, this is a big struggle. Is like, but how do I abandon all this effort? Because, we're nurturers, we're incubators. So for us, our business is like our kid. Like I did that. I spent so much time. I spent so much effort. I had a team. I had a team at one time. I was stewarding over 150 families on my team. And God was like, not like this. And I had to lay it down. And I thought to myself, this is devastating. This is absolutely devastating. Now, did he redeem it? Sure, he did. But in the moment, there are things that they're gone, they're done, right? So now I'm having to trust the Lord. So for me, that's what made it difficult to make the decision to pull back and to go in a different direction. So I just want you to be aware that when you ask this question, am I building the right thing? If you hear in your heart, like, no, this is not it, just know that that's not the biggest struggle. The biggest struggle isn't admitting that you're not building the right thing. The biggest thing is going to be unhooking from the effort, the energy, the investment of what you put into that thing, and trusting that if you move into the thing that you're supposed to be building, that God is going to redeem all of that and bring it to you like twofold, fivefold, tenfold, 100-fold. There are so many different scriptures that speak to the different return rates for what we've invested and what we've sown into the kingdom. And so, yeah, so I want you to recognize that it's one thing to say, okay, I know I'm building the wrong thing and I need to be building this over here. And then it's another thing to actually extricate yourself from that thing that you're not building anymore and trust that God will redeem that. And you're going to focus on the thing that he's called you to and put your full weight behind it, put your full attention on it and get moving. Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, the last thing that I want to kind of put out there as a mindset kind of piece is God will confirm as you go. And I think that sometimes we get so caught up in stories like Gideon's, right? So Gideon is like when God told him to go and fight the Midianites and free his countrymen, he famously said, okay, fine, I'll do it, but you've got to confirm for me. So make this fleece stay dry while the ground is wet. And God did it. And then he went, okay, now make the ground dry and the fleece wet. And he did it. And he did that beforehand, right? So he asked for a sign beforehand. He wanted confirmation beforehand. So we all get into this mindset of thinking like, oh, it's a biblical example. So we should all be always asking for confirmation before we move. And I got to tell you something, like more often than not in the Bible, confirmation comes as we go. The leper was healed as he went, as he went. Abraham was transformed as he went. Moses and the Israelites were freed as they went. Like there are so many examples of what was going on as they went and not as a result of a confirmation before. So we've really got to ask ourselves the question, what's keeping us from starting? Because if you keep telling yourself, well, it's biblical for me to ask for a confirmation beforehand and to not move beforehand, I got to tell you, it's much more biblical to move and get your confirmations along the way. There is something so powerful about being immediately obedient to God before, right? What did Jesus say to Thomas? Because Thomas was like, well, I wasn't there. And so I don't believe you, when the other disciples told them that they saw Jesus. And he's like, well, I didn't see him. And Jesus is like, blessed are those who have not seen and believe. And there is this power of going on faith and not by sight. And so we've got to become like, we've got to become really discerning in our role as kingdom entrepreneurs, because the enemy would love to hold us back no matter what and wear us out no matter what. And if he can get us believing that the only time that you can get confirmation responsibly and smartly, wisely is before you start, I I want to warn you on that. Go in your Bible and look at all of the examples of where people took God at his word and began to move in obedience, and then he confirmed it along the way. Like, the wildest one to me is Abraham and Isaac. Like, dude had his hand up and ready to kill the kid, and the angel stayed his hand, and then there was a ram in the thicket. That's a massive confirmation. And it was last minute. So this really speaks to, do we trust God? Do we trust God with the call on our lives? Do we trust God with the assignment that he's given to us? Do we trust God that we really are the girl for the job? Do we trust God that even if we are struggling and we're moving slightly in the wrong direction, that like Isaiah 30 says, he's going to be the voice behind us telling us not to the left, not to the right. This is the way, walk in it. Yeah. And so it's a very powerful thing to be able to ask the question, am I building the right thing? And then to go to work to know what the right thing is and to get moving to build the right thing. So, my friend, with that, if you know that this is your moment and you need to ask that question, and then you need to get moving in building the right thing, then I want to invite you to join me inside the Launch Lab. We're starting the Jesus Girls Business Launch Lab workshop next Monday. So you've got a little bit of time, but seriously, sis, jump in now. Go to jesusgirlgang.com/launch lab and let's figure it out together. The first day, I'm doing a kickoff on the Sunday, and I'm going to be talking all about this mindset stuff of making sure that like we're moving in Jesus girl entrepreneur, kingdom CEO, discernment and confidence, and knowing that we're the girl for the job. And that encompasses this idea that we've been talking about today, which is knowing that you're building the right thing and then knowing how to build the right thing. And that's what the Launch Lab is there for. Is it's a 5-step framework. We've talked about it here on the podcast, the Build with Faith framework. So we talk about mindset, offers, audience, sales system, and tech stack. And I help you in every one of those steps to ensure that you've got the right component for your business, for your offer, for your people, so that you know that you're building the right thing. And it's a live and interactive experience. And we have a Facebook community that just opened today. And so we're already in there talking about like, what do you do? What kind of a business are you building? And, like, what are you hoping to get out of this Launch Lab? What do you want to build right? And I just feel like this is the opportunity. We can do this on the podcast and we can talk in generalities, but when we get inside of something like the Launch Lab, I can actually help you because you can put your actual questions in the chat. I can teach to those. I can answer your questions. You can get in the group. We can dialogue about different things there. And it really becomes a place where you can know that you're building the right thing. And you can, in real time, in a 3-day workshop, you can build clarity and confidence and momentum just in those 3 days. That's great, right? So if you know that this is something that would benefit you, then listen, it's just $27. So go to jesusgirlgang.com/launch lab and jump in there and we'll get started. It officially starts on Monday, but I do a kickoff session on Sunday afternoon just so that we're all situated and ready to rock and roll. Okay? All right, friend. This was an interesting and a little bit heavier episode. But I hope that it was helpful. And if you have thoughts about it, I want to see you over in my Instagram feed. Come into my DMs. I'm Erica Pyle over on Instagram. Let me know that you listened to this episode and let me know what you're building. I would love to know. All right. So I hope to see you over there. All right. Until next time, friend, I'll see you back here, same time, same channel, next Thursday, 3 p.m. I'll see you then. Bye for now.